welcome back. Time for another episode of Revenue Optimization Radio. Brought to you today by the good folks, Upland Altify, the sales transformation company.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Revenue Optimization Radio. So this week, we're going to go back to the start. My guest on the show was a longtime presenter of Revenue Optimization Radio, and his name was, of course, Patrick Morrissey. A little over 6 months ago, Pat was the CMO of Altify, then became the GM of Upland Altify, and is now the SVP of the Enterprise Sales and Marketing Cloud and board member at Upland Software. Pat is the absolute epitome of taking opportunities and running with them. And when he told me to take a crack at hosting the podcast, I jumped in feet first. Very cool to have you on the show, Pat. Welcome.
It's good to be back, Sean. I think as you and the listeners would know, this is absolutely my number one most favorite podcast on the planet. So it's exciting to be back. Thanks for having me on.
Do you miss hosting the podcast?
I do. You know, anytime you can have a conversation with people and really just get into the art of the possible about how do you work with customers better, how do you think about really helping drive results and really see the whole thing through. It's lots of great conversations came out of that. So I remain a friend and a fan and slightly envious.
Yes, it's a really good opportunity to learn from really cool, interesting and smart people every week. I think you hosted about 60 odd episodes before I took over earlier this year. So quite a back catalogue to listen back if you're ever feeling nostalgic. So today you published a press release on how the Enterprise Sales and Marketing Cloud at Upland Software is making complex B2B selling simpler, smarter, and more connected. And the theme of the show today is about how to nail the art of continuous category creation. The journey to this point, I think for you, began probably in mid-2018 when you started planning your customer revenue optimization category launch as the then CMO of Altify. Tell me about that journey to launching a new category to market.
Yeah, a couple different things happened over the course of the time frame that gets us to current state. One is that we, from an internal Altify perspective, had spent a fair amount of time on trying to do a better job of being more explicit about our vision and our mission and our values. And we were also had taken a step back in terms of looking at the overall product futures to really try to understand what was critically important and where did we add value. And the genesis of the category was coming to the conclusion that I think we, like a lot of software companies, aspire to be a market leader, but the important thing was not the product per se, or it wasn't any individual, person or line of code. It was more about what were we delivering for the end customer. And what we were hearing a lot in the market is you guys are more than just a software company. What you're actually helping us with is strategy and best practices. You've got best in class enterprise methodology to really help us focus on our customers. And the aha that we would hear back from customers, and it was the same thing that we believed to be internally, which was if you can get out of your own mindset and get into the customer's mindset and really start from what is the customer trying to do and how do we help them do it, then lots of good things happen. And so the evolution that ultimately became what we called customer revenue optimization was really starting first and foremost with how do you put yourself in the shoes of the customer and understand their strategy and how do you help them deliver. And how do you align best practice, capabilities around the customer and their end customer, number one? How do you anchor that in methodology, which is very simply the reality of today's world is you can't do enterprise selling, and certainly in B2B, without a methodology, which in plain English is get everybody on the same page, speaking the same language about the customer. And then last but not least is the technology component of it. How do we get people taking the strategy, the mindset, the best practices, and scaling them every day by activating the entire revenue team and capturing all that goodness about customers and markets and outcomes in the application they're using every day, which is Salesforce?
I think a lot of the examples of companies that would have launched big categories before, Salesforce, HubSpot, companies like that are much larger companies, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of revenue. Was it a little bit daunting bringing a category launch to market as a smaller B2B seller or smaller company in revenue terms?
Yeah, I think it is, because the reality of that is it's much easier to launch a category if you have just endless money to throw at it, which is not how most of the world works. So if you're one of those unicorn companies like an Uber or like an Airbnb or like a Zoom who took immense amount of resources and poured it into it, category is generally a little easier conversation. It's more challenging as a smaller organization, but I think the insight that really helps think about category in big and small ways for us and for everybody else is category is not just about the money, it's about thinking about the problem differently. That's the first thing I'd say about it. So one was getting much more focused on how do we see the world differently and how do we tell that story uniquely, with the idea that you have to evangelize the problem, not evangelize the company. I think everybody's got very little time for companies who talk only about themselves and only talk about feature and function. That's pretty boring pretty quickly. And frankly, as a consumer, whether in a B2B context or in a consumer context, that sucks when somebody's only interested in talking about themselves. So if you can flip the script and think about the customer and the problem, that's one thing. And the other insight about category that we really adopted from the book Play Bigger to inform the dialogue is part of being thoughtful about category creation is trying to build strikes and trying to build more concentrated content so that you can behave as an industry leader and punch above your weight, but do it for a week and get on the radar. Because most of us can't go toe to toe with the leading brands. And the last thing I'd say, Sean, is that, category is an evolution over time. It's not just you wake up one day with a smart idea, talk differently, and everybody gets your category. It's a long game. So you've got to be relentless and focused about continuing to evangelize the problem, the differentiation in the story, and look at the outcomes over time.
I think I was lucky enough to join Altify at the time where you had just launched the category and were planning the next strikes. The book Play Bigger really kind of focuses on that. But one of the pieces that I thought was very interesting was the certification of your sales folks, how you could make sure that you have your whole organization on the same page. How important was that to the success of the launch internally rather than externally?
I would say it was critically important, and it's more than just the sales people. It really has to start with the board and with the CEO to do a category, to try to build a category successfully. It can't just be a marketing invention that then you do extra training to help sales. It's got to be strategic intent that's driven from the board and the CEO. And then it's got to be replicated across the entirety of the executive team so that it's not just the salespeople telling the new set of stories or new set of slides. It's more about here's the way we see the world differently. And here's how you get everybody on the same page. That takes constant reinforcement about the message and where the high ground is and where the difference is, so that salespeople feel like they've got partners in crime, whether it's technical sales or it's executives or it's the CSM who's helping the customer be successful day to day, that understands, the what and the why.
And I mean, from a strike perspective, I was involved in some of the events that were planned in Q4 in 2019 with Altify across the customer revenue optimization summits in both San Francisco and in London. How important are in-person events pre-COVID? Obviously, how important are those events to really driving the relevance of the category with your target force, with your target base?
Well, in our case, it certainly helped to do a summit within a summit in terms of Dreamforce being the preeminent place for B2B sales and revenue executives to show up, for us to have our own view of the world. I think the reality of all of us that are in shelter and sell in place mode right now as we're trying to navigate through COVID is it's less about an individual event per se and more about consistency of message and trying to find the customer where they are in the channel that they're in the way that's going to be most helpful for them to get to the right kind of outcome. Because it's still, events are great because you can have a big tent and get a lot of people together. But if you don't have the details minded in terms of the relationships, the follow-up, the focus on the actual needs, it doesn't get too far. So I think the reality now that we're all trying to navigate through is, hey, one big event or giant webinars don't work unto themselves. It's all the little pieces that you come together and bring the story to life over time.
And I think one of the ways we bring that story to life is via the podcast and Revenue Optimization Radio. In Q4 2019, Altify was acquired by Upland Software. How much of the acquisition by Upland Software was enabled by that consistent market positioning that is provided by launching a category like customer revenue optimization?
Well, I think it certainly plays a part in the story. Part of the aha from an Upland perspective was really wanting to have a compelling offer to the CRO or the head of sales. So being able to have people who are senior leaders in sales, in sales ops, in sales enablement, and just best practices more broadly to help, revenue leaders, which was the genesis of the podcast as well as the category, I think has been critical. The other thing I'd say that has been really interesting is come to find out that when you blend in the traditional Altify products around opportunity management and account planning with some of the Upland products like Savvion and RO Innovation for proposal and reference management directly, as well as Compost from content operations. All those things are really predicated on helping the revenue team really align to the customer in the way that they want to buy. So it turns out that the synergy was much bigger than expected because all of those individual pieces are much more compelling when you start to bring them together in the ways that we help companies articulate their strategy around revenue optimization and driving results for their customers.
So from your personal perspective, you went from the CMO of Altify to the GM of Altify, taking over from our old CEO, Anthony Reynolds, and now onto the SVP of the entire ESM business unit. Talk to me about that transition for you. That was obviously a couple of jumps in a very short space of time. How did you find that personally?
I found it to be very challenging, and it's definitely stretched me quite a bit, but it's also given me some opportunity to really spend some other time with some really sophisticated and seasoned leaders and to really understand the art of the possible and try to figure out how do we tell a bigger story and really drive the business. I think it's also put me back into a little bit of learning mode. It's very easy, I think, sometimes to slip into, hey, I think I know what we're trying to do. I know what the play is. I know how to run a marketing organization because I've done it for 20 years. I've done this for much less time. So I find myself in big and small ways going back to different, not just revenue leaders, but other cross-functional leaders to understand what they've learned, what they think about, and try to think about the business more holistically. So definitely a challenge, but lots of good fun and lots of goodness as well.
So Pat, before we take a break, I want you to talk to me about the spring release across the Enterprise Sales and Marketing Cloud. That includes major enhancements by Altify, Compost, Savvion, and RO Innovation. Talk to me about that release that you have coming out today and what's included in it.
We're thrilled about the release, Sean, because what we've really tried to do across the entire product portfolio is focus on helping B2B sellers with a better experience that is simpler, smarter, and more connected. And it's really the reflection of more than 6 months of work to bring major releases across the entire portfolio, whether that's the Altify side with improvements in opportunity management and decision criteria, or it's the flexibility of account grouping and hierarchies for the account side of the equation, or probably one of the single most important pieces that we're bringing to market with the Spring 20 release is new integration with Tableau to help sales leaders really understand and visualize the data that they have around win rates and deal sizes and pipeline development, and really understand the art of the possible when you get into how do you help use that data to enable the entire revenue team and particularly to help the leaders coach and extend. And broadly, we've focused back to the simplicity idea of improving the UI and the user experience. With Compost on the content operations side, we've added new integrations and partners with Viva and Airtable and Sprinklr and Hootsuite, or just broadly around the idea of collaboration, whether it's activating the entire team around reference management and deeper insights, or it's improving the team collaboration, which the result ends up being better response quality and more effective, more efficient development and a higher output in terms of proposal management on the Savvion side. So a lot of innovation, a lot of real depth and technical upgrade, but really with a lot of focus on what's the so what in terms of making it easier for users to interact and getting to the data and the analytics to help improve the outcomes.
Yeah, I love the analytics theme across that because you would have seen a lot of that from the big Salesforce release and Dreamforce last year when it came out talking about 360 Truth. A lot of it, the emphasis now is really focusing on that data. And even Altify customers like Splunk really doing well in the marketplace. We'll probably delve into that analytics topic a little bit more, and also the challenge of how to nail the art of continuous category creation in the second half. We're going to take a break now, pay some bills, and we'll be right back with Pat Morrissey, SVP of the Enterprise Sales and Marketing Cloud at Upland Software.
We live in a subscription economy. You're only as successful as your customers, and that requires a mindset shift from what's our strategy for the customer to what's our customer's strategy and how can we help. Focusing on your customers' needs and providing value in every interaction is critical to building long-term relationships and sustained sales success. The challenge for most sales leaders and their teams is their sales process doesn't match how customers buy in today's digital world. Sustained growth and sales execution are impossible because the revenue team isn't aligned with consistent process and methodology to understand their customers' people and their problems. Altify's customer revenue optimization solutions activates the entire revenue team with a combination of strategy, methodology, and applications to help companies deliver more value to their customers. The result is increased sales velocity, improved win rates, and increased customer satisfaction. With a CRO strategy, now you can effectively collaborate across the entire revenue team to win new business and unlock more cross-sell and upsell opportunities. Built natively on the Salesforce platform, Altify helps revenue leaders and their teams achieve sustained revenue growth and sales success. Visit Altify.com today to see how they help accelerate sales performance for some of the world's best sales teams, including Autodesk, Comcast, GE, Honeywell, Salesforce, Tableau, and United Health Group.
Welcome back to Revenue Optimization Radio. I'm joined today by Patrick Morrissey, the SVP of the Enterprise Sales and Marketing Cloud at Upland Software. We're talking about the challenge of continuous category creation as documented in the book Play Bigger. Altify in 2019 launched the Customer Revenue Optimization category, was acquired by Upland Software in November 2019, and now has an opportunity as part of the broader Enterprise Sales and Marketing Cloud and business unit at Upland Software to redefine that category and add to it and augment it. Pat, one of the hardest things to do is for companies to nail that continuous category creation piece. How do you think having 4 companies as part of the new cloud gives you an opportunity to expand the conversation you'll have with your customers? And does that lead to a new category or an expansion of customer revenue optimization?
It's an interesting question, Sean, because I think our situation is different than a lot of other organizations. You can't plan a category with the idea that you're going to be acquired and have a bunch of new things to be put in your portfolio.
Yeah.
But if you go back to the idea of categories about understanding the problem a little bit differently, one of the insights we had around the customer revenue optimization category is the importance of putting the customer at the center of everything that you do. Customers aren't an outcome of your funnel. They're in the middle of your business. And intriguingly, when we were bought by Upland, one of the things that we found is Kapost in the content operations space had talked very much about one voice. And I think that fits very nicely and actually expands the vision we already had around the category about aligning to the customer strategy and how they want to buy and helping them shepherd through not just an initial sale, but really a lifetime relationship. And so that's a example of what's critically important in category is you need to continuously be looking and refining and redesigning the art of the possible and crafting a longer term vision for the category, because category is not one and done like a product release.
Yeah.
You know, category is all about opening up a whole new segment and a whole new different set of insights. And then it's incumbent on anyone who wants to try to be the category leader to continuously drive and add to the vision and add to the capabilities about how to solve those problems in a way that's going to be compelling to the customers.
I think it's interesting, the mastering one voice aspect. A couple of weeks ago, I had Upland Software employees Zoe Randolph and Toby Murdoch on the podcast talking about the book of the same name, Mastering One Voice, and their journey in terms of content operations. How important is it for marketing operations companies and marketing software in a very crowded MarTech space to try and evolve and add other tools to their toolkit like Kapost have done, now becoming stronger as part of the entire business unit?
Kapost is a good example that I think illustrates a larger market trend that's going on, which is the reality of content marketing over the last 10 years is the answer to everybody's content problem, if you will, was to generate more content, which is just a crap strategy. And what I think that Kapost helps organizations do is really figure out what content matters and bring it to the customer at the point in time it matters in the sales cycle or in the broader relationship. And that is extremely critical now because the reality for all of us who are sheltering and try to work through COVID is it's no longer optional to have a 100% digital strategy. You've got to be really good digitally. And what that means in actual practice means you've got to bring content to your customers and your prospects where they need it and help drive and facilitate a conversation that turns into a relationship over time. So Kapost is one of the elements that I think is a critical enabler to thinking about content at scale. And if you look at great customer examples like Salesforce, who's using Kapost to facilitate the art of the possible with content to really help tell the broader story that crosses all the different clouds that they have, from MuleSoft and data integration to Tableau and analytics to sales, service, and marketing clouds that are the franchise that built Salesforce. And being able to bring that capability together to really help them focus on customers is where the high ground is in the digital world we all live in now.
You talked in the first half about the learning curve that comes with leading a brand new unit. There's been a huge learning curve, I think, for everybody in the unit across going from having one product and one story to tell with 4 different stories. One of the things I think is most interesting about Kapost is how you can use that to bring products to market from a product marketing and a positioning perspective. It's just a fantastic product, and I've loved learning about it and using it, and now I suppose being part of that positioning element of it as well. Talk to me a little bit about RO innovation and the customer advocacy challenge and that issue that customers have of getting references from their customers so they can tell a better story to the market.
The high ground in B2B selling, or really any selling, is when the customer can do the selling for you. And I think that puts the emphasis on, for a lot of organizations, figuring out how do they cultivate those friends and fans and references and make them public and really help give them extra energy to go tell the story at scale. So there's nobody in B2B selling who doesn't have some flavor of a reference program, yet for a lot of people, that reference program is sub-optimized. So it's more than just, again, technology. It's really thinking about, and what RO innovation does is provide the foundation for us to have a dialogue and share best practices with customers about what does good look like in building a reference management program, and how do you facilitate and bring value to the customers and use the customer voice as part of the selling motion you're already in and integrate it into the sales cycle. So it's exciting for me as somebody who grew up in marketing and has seen this problem for 25 years, which is as old as time. Who are our best references? How are we managing the relationships? Where are we using them? How are we doing? But maybe more importantly, how is the customer doing? And are we really lined up with them both as individuals and as being good stewards of their brands in a way that's going to help all of us be more successful? That's really where these things come together.
So when you talk about customer references, one of our great reference as a customer is CenturyLink, and Maurice Goodman, who heads up sales enablement there, is a bona fide friend of ours and of Revenue Optimization Radio, appearing on the podcast a couple of weeks ago to talk about customer lifecycle. I believe he's going to be a guest of yours as part of the Enterprise Sales and Marketing webinar that's going out on May 27th. Talk to us about what we can expect from that webinar.
Well, you're right. Mo is a great friend of Upland, and the team has purchased multiple products. But I think that what's important about the story that Mo is going to share is really trying to live inside of a seismic transformation that CenturyLink is moving through, from being just a communications or telecom provider to actually being a multifaceted IT solutions provider. And that's a wholesale change in how they think about customers, how they go to market, and what's required to actually help enable their entire revenue team to produce the right kind of outcomes for their customers. So he's going to give some insight into what that evolution and what that transformation looks like. And I find him to be a best-in-class practitioner about how to think about the customer lifecycle holistically, how to think about transformation at scale, particularly when you've got multiple business lines, multiple owners, a whole bunch of product and very technical solution sets, and really rethinking the art of the possible and engaging with customers, with the idea that he should have some great takeaways too for how to think about this for anybody who's leading the sales or revenue team or in sales enablement, about where do you focus to really deliver results and success.
So we're really excited to have Mo as part of that webinar. For people who want to register, I guess uplandsoftware.com/Altify is the place to go.
Yeah, and if you're not able to attend the webinar, it's still good to register and see the replay as well, because Mo's a best-in-class practitioner, have lots of good insight for you. And yes, you can find that, and you should be able to find links to that on our social channels, as well as uplandsoftware.com/Altify.
Pat, genuine pleasure having you on the show. Looking forward to continue working with you over the next couple of years and continuing to play bigger. Pat Morrissey, SVP of the Enterprise Sales and Marketing Cloud at Upland Software. Thanks for joining me today.
You bet. Thanks, Sean. Wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Revenue Optimization Radio with your host, Sean Broderick, on the Funnel Radio channel. Podcasts of this live program are available from RevenueOptimizationRadio.com and all your favorite podcast apps, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and more. The sponsor for this program has been Upland Altify.